The War at Home. That's the video name for today. And the topic of it has to do with what is happening inside the borders of the United States while the war in Europe is happening. So let's take a look at the concepts. What is meant by a wartime economy? What did the role of propaganda play in World War I? And finally, how did the joining of the war affect women, African Americans, and civil liberties in general inside the United States? And two vocab words for today: propaganda, which I'm hoping you've heard before now, and the second one is the Great Migration. So, the war at home. What can the United States do to, how is it going to help the wartime effort? And that has to do with a wartime economy. That's what the United States is going to shift into. And it's simply an economy that has a focus on the war. The number one priority is the war. And one might argue that the first step in this is actually selling the war itself. And I don't mean that in terms of dollars, but trying to convince the citizens of the country that the United States going to war is in their best interest. And that's where propaganda comes into play. You try and promote the fighting overseas or promote the reason why you're fighting. It is for a good cause, a worthy cause. There's an example of a piece of propaganda on your right there, and I'll talk about that again shortly, but in this case it gives an opportunity for people to help finance the war. So selling the war to the citizens at home is maybe the first and most important effort. And then the another way to do this, or another way that a wartime economy is important, is because of industrial production is going to focus on the war now. You might have a business who normally produces some type of factory good, maybe like a car, something of that nature. And some of that production now is going to be halted and or shifted from whatever it was that they built or created, and now they're going to create something for the war itself, something that is useful for the soldiers in Europe. Um, Along with that shift in a wartime economy, you get individuals certainly helping out with this as well. There's something called gasless Sundays, where in order to preserve gasoline for the war and the fighting overseas, that people would try and prevent themselves from using any gasoline on Sundays. Daylight savings time. This is where we get daylight savings time for the first time ever. The idea here is, well, if you keep the days longer, then you won't need to use things like gasoline to light your home in the evening and at night. So again, a small idea, but hopefully it has a huge consequences or positive consequences for how you support the troops overseas. Victory gardens, growing your own garden in your home so you eat less food, buy less food from the grocery store, more gets sent overseas again. Farmers are going to increase how many crops they're growing. If you consider the United States as only one of multiple allied powers, you're now in the war with them together. So there's plenty of people to feed overseas. And then if we come back to this piece of propaganda here, Liberty bonds. Liberty is just kind of a good way of selling the idea of freedom and promoting the war, but a bond is something that people buy. And you buy a bond, that's money that goes to the government. The government takes that money in the present and uh, you know, does whatever it needs to with it. Buy material for an airplane, builds a car, so on and so forth. Um, and they can put that money to immediate use overseas to help support the war. Later on, a while down the road, the government is going to pay somebody back with interest. And that's how individual people, along with the government itself, can financially support the war. So, with the United States economy working to help out the soldiers that go overseas to Europe and fight, um, we have to ask ourselves who is keeping the economy going at home? And that answer, we could say, starts off with women. While women have had factory jobs prior to World War One, they haven't held a lot of the positions that are considered men-only positions, if you will. And some of those jobs you might consider to be men only would be like a railroad worker, bricklayer, dock worker. Um, these are jobs that men had, not women. And during World War One, women are forced to take these jobs, and they do a very competent job working them. So much so, in fact, that it's going to actually help their cause to try and get the right to vote. The World War One doesn't end until 1918. Women don't get suffrage in the United States until 1919, 1920. So you can see how that helps their cause for the right to vote. With all that said, a lot of women are going to resume their previous roles prior to World War One, and a smaller minority are going to keep work positions or stay in the workforce after World War One. Another group we need to look at and be aware of their contributions to United States history at this time is African Americans. The first area that they're going to contribute is in fighting. We have to keep in mind that African Americans were fighting in the Civil War for the United States. So they're certainly fighting in World War One, but there is a big difference between 1860, the early 1860s and 1917. African Americans are actually divided on whether or not they should be participating in the war. And the reason why is because they would need to ask themselves, what freedoms are they fighting for? Why are they fighting for the United States that actually is not really following through on its promises it's made to citizens, which African Americans uh, um, are and have been since the end of the Civil War, essentially. So some are going to fight, some are going to remain home in the United States. For those that remain home, there are a lot of jobs up north, industrial jobs up north that are available to them, or at least so they think. And this introduces a period of time, not introduces, but we see the speeding up of a time period called the Great Migration, where we see a lot of African Americans from the South moving to the urban cities in the North. And they're looking for industrial jobs. They're also looking to escape some of the issues that the South is known for, the racism, the discrimination. But unfortunately, they're going to find many of the same things in the North that they find in the South. A big disappointment.